So we are up under this Corvette Z06 and it has a bad starter, and so there's the starter and it was dragging real bad and you can smell it, and so we need to get it out, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to squeeze it out around this exhaust, but we're going to try to, and if we can't, we'll undo the exhaust right there and right here. And this thing is very tight spaces on it, and so we are going to hopefully we have it jacked up enough. We've got jack on it and of course stands, but I think we got it high enough. It's still a little tight, but that's the only jack I could get up under it, and just because it's so low, and that's as high as it would lift it. So I guess I could put my other one up under it and jack it higher, but we'll try it like this first. So let me get these two bolts out of the starter, and I've got the positive terminal off the battery, so I don't have to worry about anything shorting out or anything. So we're going to go ahead and take the two bolts off and see if we can get it out through this little space between those oil lines and whatever, I guess these are fuel lines right here. See if we can get it around those, or maybe it's, I don't know what that is, but we're gonna see if we can get it out around it. If not, we'll take the exhaust off. If we can get it out around those, we'll let it droop, and while it's drooping, we'll take the wires off, because we can't get up in there to get the wires off of it as it is. So let me get those bolts out and we'll see what we can do. Alright, so starter's unbolted and the wires don't have enough slack to get it down there, so I'm having to, can't see anything. So coming up through here, I undid what I thought was the wire that I needed to undo. It was a 1/2 inch. Turns out it was the solenoid and the wire going to the starter, so I undid that one and I really didn't need to. So right now, like I said, I have no idea if y'all can see anything, because I can't see it. I'm working on the actual bolt that needs, or the actual nut that needs to come off to get the wire off. It's up in there somewhere. Don't know if you can see it or not. And so I'm working on getting that one off, and where I'm sticking the camera up between the frame catalytic converter is where I'm getting my hand up in there with a boxed in 13mm, and so I'm getting that up in there and undoing that nut. So it's very tight spaces we're working in here, but we're getting it done. There's a wire for the I think it's the solenoid wire, you know, coming from the starter switch, and I need to, you know, the ignition switch to energize the solenoid, and it feels like it's some kind of a clip-in, like a plug. So I got to figure out how that, like I say, I'm just feeling around, I can't see anything, so I got to try to figure out how that comes unplugged and get that unplugged. So let me continue working on this and we'll see what it's like once I get the wire undone. I'm thinking before I undo the exhaust though, I may have better luck, and it might be easier to undo these two oil lines. This has a this is a dry sump setup. It's got an oil tank over here in this fender, it looks like. And I might have better luck just draining the oil and undoing these two oil lines and getting them out of the way. That would open up the space between this cross member and might be able to get the starter out right there. So That looks like that would be a lot easier to undo than taking the exhaust out, because these exhaust bolts up in there, 4 of them, they're going to be hard to get to, and if I break one of those off, what a nightmare. So we're going to hopefully get this thing out. It's a small starter, so we're hopefully going to get it out between this gap right here. But if we can't, we may undo these oil lines. That may be the easier route to go. Alright, so our current situation is I used a 13 millimeter, or maybe I used a half. I've got both here. Stubby wrench to get the nut off, and I got the wire loose. The battery cable off the starter, but I cannot get the starter out, and I can't even get it out of its hole. And the problem is it's up against the converter and it's hitting up against the block. So to get it out of that hole, I've got to move it towards the converter to clear that little spot on the I don't know, I guess you're going to call this the clutch housing, because it's not the transmission. Wait, that's on the block right there. I'm backwards here. Oh, there's the clutch housing. So that little spot on the block is keeping us from getting pulling the starter out. So it needs to go towards the converter, and it can't. So it's kind of stuck right where it is. So I've got these 2 bolts out. They came out okay. I'm going to go ahead and spray these 4 that bolt the exhaust to the manifold, and we're going to try to get those out, and we're going to take the converter out, and hopefully I may have to even do these oil lines to get the converter out. I don't know. So still so far easier than the Sequoia that I did the starter on, but not as easy as I was hoping it was going to be. So let me get those out, and we'll see if we can get this thing out of here. So those bolts down there, one of them's about impossible to get to, and I've tried a few of them, and without putting a cheater bar on them on the ratchet, they're not coming off, and I can't get to them without using a couple extensions too. And so when I'm I just can't get good leverage, and I'm afraid they're going to break. If you look, the tops of the bolts are exposed, so I'm sure they've got some rust on them. So I decided to see how hard, or see if the manifold bolts would come out easily in the head, and they're right here, easy to get to, and I've got all of them out except for 2, which I've got loose, and they came out easily. None of them broke or anything. And so that's what I've decided to do, and I'm going to pull the manifold out and let it drop down. I need to clear the spark plugs, make sure I don't break any spark plugs. I've got it loose right now, and I was looking to I got back under it to make sure with it loose if I could get the starter out, and I can't. I thought maybe I could get a little bit of wiggle in it, which I can, but it's not enough to get the starter out. So I'm going to go ahead and take those other 2 bolts completely out, and I'll be holding up on the manifold when I do it. Pull it towards the wheel here, pull it this way to clear the spark plugs, and then let it drop down as far as it'll go. And hopefully that'll be enough room. And like I said, I undid the exhaust you know, at the next coupler, so it should allow it to come down, unless it just interferes with something here. The AC compressor may be a little bit in the way, but I think we've got enough clearance to let it drop a little bit. We can pull it all the way over here, hopefully. And the more we pull it, I think the more it'll pivot away from the block. So let's see how this works. Like I said, it took like no time to get those bolts out. So it's a lot easier working up here than it is underneath. Now this is the way I get the starter out. So you can see I've got it just dropped down. It's not, well, the gasket, I just made the gasket fall. Anyway, it's dropped down, and it is, that gave us plenty of room. So now, underneath, we can reuse this gasket. Underneath, what we've got, of course, you know, that pipe dropped down, and that opened up that area a lot. And I've got the starter out. There's a little plastic shield deal right there, a little 10mm nut bolt right there. I just loosened that up, and that gave me enough room to wiggle the starter out. That was kind of keeping it from moving over as well. Couldn't see it before. But we got the starter ready to come out, except for that one last plug for the solenoid. So I'm going to go ahead and it looks like I can see it from, I rotated the starter where I can see that from up top. So I've kind of seen how it comes undone. I just need to get a screwdriver in there and release the clip, and I can unplug the wire, and then we can pull the starter out. We've got plenty of room to get it through this hole now. And it's out. That wire had a plug and had a little clip that slipped over here. So I got the screwdriver in behind it, popped the clip up, and pushed the wire out. This is the wire, the one I undid that I didn't need to. I was just kind of filling up in there, and I couldn't tell what I was messing with. Now, doing it over again, I would undo the manifold first, because that made things so much easier, so much more room in there. And going back, of course, I'll put the manifold on last, but that'll allow me to get it up in there and have a little more room to get to these wires and everything with that manifold like it is. So now I just need to go get a new starter. And this thing stinks. It smells like burnt electronics. So let me go get a new starter.